Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Tony Dudzik, Pick Guardian.
Jared Brand one.
Hey, everybody, this is me, Todd Novak. Thank you so much for joining us for the Guitar Knobs podcast tonight, today, or whatever, wherever you're at in the, lunar, solar,
In the galaxy,
Yes.
wherever you happen to be in the galaxy.
That's right. We are also
Force.
joined by a very special guest tonight,
Sideburns McGee.
That's
right.
a.k.a.
Lamb chops.
Yeah.
Chase Gullett, Gullett Guitar Co., Chasing Vintage Guitars.
Kind of look like a president from like the 1800s.
Yeah.
He does.
It looks good.
Yeah.
It's a very 1860s look.
Yes. All right. Well, hey, everybody. We are going to have a fantastic show tonight. We're going to talk about something that has surely crossed the mind of every guitar player, great and small, at some point in time. We are going to discuss Guitar Setup 101. Woohoo! Now, I just want to set something straight here.
Yes.
We are not going to it's not going to be a step-by-step, here's how to do everything.
Oh, I was told there was going to be a step-by-step.
There's
That's
none.
why I came in tonight.
I was told there was
I will
gonna be
refund your
donuts.
tickets. We are going to cover the bases and understand why you do these things and how they relate to each other, and talk about tools and talk about all kinds of other good stuff. So it's going to be great.
Or else.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We've got a couple of announcements real quick. First of all, two things.
Yes.
We skipped the what do we do on the show, but that's okay.
I can do it.
You want to do it? Okay,
Yeah.
do it.
We like to normally talk to builders of boutique gear.
He builds boutique gear. So
Well, he
so
does.
that
That's
counts.
right. I guess we do. Are we going to talk
We're
to
going to
you?
get to that in a second.
I
all
think
three
we're
do.
here for conversation and good times.
Okay, excellent times. So we talk to builders of guitars and amps and pedals and accessories and every once in a while fez builders and things like that. So
yeah. And
and we like to get the story behind the story.
That's right. And now you know
The rest of the story.
All right. So fitting that mold here is Chase Gullett. Chase makes handmade guitars under the moniker Chasing Vintage.
I have one.
They are beauties.
They
you, guys.
are
Appreciate
exceptional pieces of work. Where can people go see those right now on the internet?
You can go to chasingvintageguitars.com. You can find me on Instagram under, you guessed it, chasingvintageguitars.com. Facebook as well. I'm sure there'll be a link in the podcast here. If you want to see them in person, there's a couple of them inside the Delaware Music Center in downtown Delaware in Ohio, just a little north of Columbus.
Nice.
If you are
If you're local to Ohio.
super regional.
Yeah. Yeah, I forget we're worldwide.
Yeah. All right. So make sure you guys go check those things out and wallow in the awesomeness of supreme guitardom.
And as we've talked in the past, the beauty of dealing with someone like Chase is you can pretty much specify what you want.
Yeah.
I mean, I want these pickups. I want this neck profile. He has a couple of standard body shapes.
There's a little bit of guidelines you kind of have to kind of fall within there, but for the most part, like Tony was saying, pickup choices, radiuses of the fretboard, fret wire size, things like that, and even within my headstocks, I've got 2 or 3 designs that are available for it, and several body styles as well. So scale length, there's a lot of options there.
That's right.
But what I do not do is I do not build like replicas.
Yeah,
So you
right.
don't come to me for a 59 Les Paul replica. I'm not your
Hey,
guy.
I was wondering if you could build me a 59 Les Paul replica.
Yeah.
I cannot.
Yeah.
With hide glue.
Well, I don't know that it's. I wouldn't. Cannot is probably the wrong word. I will not.
Yeah,
is a better way to put
No,
it.
I think
Yeah.
that's good because honestly, I was talking to some other friends about this, and the replicas are just that. They're
that's
replicas.
exactly it.
And honestly, I think Gibson
So
has been
profound.
doing a pretty good job of reproducing some
They
of their
are
classic
now.
designs.
They
I mean,
are
there was
now,
a period of
certainly.
time it is a flip of the coin, but I think that they're at a price point now that I think is. It's higher than I was ever used to paying, but I think it's at a price point that it needs to be to get a decent quality instrument.
I'm buddies with their new developer, and he's done a lot of work on improving the custom shop guitars you could buy.
So I guess the lesson is I mean, you're not going to really save much. And at the end of the day, you're not going to have a guitar that is probably as valuable as having an actual whatever you want to duplicate.
You want what the builder has to offer anyway.
And that's where, stuff like Chase has original design. So that's pretty cool. I think that, there's other people we've had on the show, they have original designs. And we have people that, are inspired by other designs. But I think I like the fact that, you've focused in on that particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we got to get to a couple of thank yous and whatnots here right now. We want to say a big fat thank you to Rode Microphones
Articulating
for
arms.
providing those articulating arms, which are attached to the Procaster mic.
Tasty.
Very tasty goodness. Love these mics. We also want to say thank you to them for providing our Rodecaster Pro, this outstanding piece of equipment that allows us to do our podcast every week for you.
The mothership.
The mothership, yes. Get one for yourself.
Do you remember the old days when we used to have that rack of stuff with a computer and all
Yes,
this, that, and
that
the
I
other?
had to actually
little
build.
whatnots
This-
and weirdo things.
You can have a cell
They
phone
have sound
call in.
effects that we're not allowed to touch.
Yes, that's
I
true.
love touching the sound effects.
All right, so thank you guys,
all got
Rode
Ric Flair in
out there. The Knicks, our buddies, the Knicks,
Nick and Nick.
Nick and Nick out
They're
there.
running Nick and Nick.
Yes, sir. We also want to call attention to a listener mail that we got. This is from Mike Millard. He says, greetings, gents. I do a lot of driving. About a month ago, while surfing the podcast channels, I found you guys at and the G-Knobs are now my favorite listen. Thank you so much. That means a tremendous amount to us. So I appreciate you sharing that. But more importantly, I also sit in my shop, and as a weekend warrior slapping T-style guitars together and an occasional amp, I've learned a lot from you guys. I really like the 101s. Do tell.
Yep.
Keep them coming. Maybe I missed it, but a 101 on guitar setup would be really cool.
think I know a guy.
Ask and you
it's
shall
just
receive,
Mike,
right?
come on.
So based on this email, we said, hey, you know what? Let's do that. So that's what we're doing tonight.
Excellent.
So thank you, Mike Millard, for sending that.
Keep on trucking, man.
Yeah. So we're going to get to all the stuff that he was asking about in here, talking about all understanding everything and tools and all that business. He says, keep up the good work, guys. Mike in State College, PA.
Hey.
So thank you, sir, for sending that. We appreciate that stuff.
There's a school there somewhere. Isn't
Go
there?
Nittany Lions, Mike.
All right.
Blue and white.
That's right. Let's see here. That's it right now. Let's get on to what's going on in our music worlds this week, gentlemen.
Yes.
Monsieur Ballonnet.
So this week, I had something I wanted to talk about, but I changed my mind because I don't want to talk about it now.
You don't have to, old friend.
But I would like to talk about my buddy Jared here put together some extra screen tops for me.
It's my fault.
Well, it's not just your fault.
Screen top pickups.
Screen
tasty
top
looking.
pickups. If you go over to
ScreenTopPickups.com.
I've seen that site before. Wonderful people there.
Yes.
Me and Jared. So we're doing some little customization on a couple. But the cool thing about it, I talked to Jared about making a hum canceling P90, aka a sidewinder. Basically, it's something that
Lindy Fralin does that.
Yeah, Lindy does it. There's a couple of other companies that do it, and it's based loosely on like an EBO, Gibson EBO bass pickup.
Yeah.
I mean, at least how in the function. So it's two coils flipped on their sides.
Yep.
That go up into.
And there's still two magnets.
Yeah.
Too. And it's kind of the same magnetic flux field.
So you end up with two coils, and it's a hum canceling. But my experience with a lot of these sidewinders, and Lindy's in particular, and I'm sure this one, once I put it in a guitar, is it still sounds like a P90.
Yeah.
I mean, Gibson came out years ago with a stacked P90, a P100.
Very dark.
And it sounds like a humbucker.
Yeah.
Versus these, I mean, I've used Lindy's in a couple of my, like Les Paul Juniors, any single pickup guitar with a P90.
Very good quality.
And they sound great. And you don't, the one annoying thing about a P90 can be the hum. So I think this is a really good solution. It's the same footprint as a standard P90, and these are the screen top versions, so it's got a little fancy stainless steel mesh grill and some gold underneath it, so it looks really cool. But more importantly, it's going to be pretty quiet. So we're going to put that through the test phase, and then when they're ready to go, we'll put them up on the website, screentoppickups.com.
Outstanding. All right, Chase, what's going on in your music world this week besides building guitars?
And running a music store.
Well, not technically running the music store. I run the repair shop.
Oh, the repair shop.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool. So it's the way it is beneficial because I am inside of a music store. So that kind of helps both of us there. So
yeah.
I work closely with Adam Foray over there. So they run the Delaware Music Academy and the Delaware Music Center. So they've got new used gear, and then I run Gullett Guitar Co. out of there, which is the service center.
Smart.
So yeah, it works out. I get walk-ins, and also he gains a lot of my customers, and vice versa. So it works out really well for everybody involved.
I'm going to have to take a run up there.
Yeah, you have to come up and check it out.
I want to go with you.
We're doing a little bit of reno out there, so that's kind of been a lot of what the last couple of weeks have been. Is we're expanding and putting 8 lessons rooms in the shop there.
Nice.
To kind of expand the academy.
That's
there.
smart.
So, yeah, it's going to
really
be nice.
smart.
So like the whole guitar wall is getting moved out, and so we've kind of been like under construction for a little bit out there. So it's been cool though. Yeah.
So that's what's going on in your music world.
That has been my
week?
music world this week. Is just trying to get.
Got yourself a hammer. You got yourself a measuring tape.
I saw on the gram that you had like a 3 pickup Les Paul custom in, man.
That thing
looked gnarly.
Awesome. No, that guitar though is awesome. It was in. It's actually some of the stuff we'll talk about with the the setup kind of stuff was because it had really bad frets. But it's 78, so
no frets.
It's actually, oddly enough, for being that year, there was plenty of meat on that bone, which is rare because there's nothing there. But they were worn pretty badly. But there was enough. They were nice and wide though, so it was the correct era. But the height wasn't gone.
I mean, it just means it was an awesome guitar.
Yeah,
because it was played.
Yep, that's exactly it. So there was a lot of really heavy dents there. The binding had kind of shrunk, so if you actually like pulled your high E string off, it would kind of pull and pluck underneath there and get stuck.
I hate that.
And, so that was some stuff that I had to take care of on that guy.
I think that's kind of a special effect.
Yeah. It's a solo. You can't hear it.
You can't hear it. How about you, Jared? What's going on in your music world this week?
So I talked about the Foppy amp that I bought.
Still haven't seen it yet, by the way.
I know. I love that every day. So I got out my Reverend, and it was a 6-gun, and I put a set of screen tops in it.
I love screen tops.
And the
What are you
bridge.
doing with the rail?
What am I doing with what?
The rail hammer.
Oh no, I have that just loose hanging out in the shop. If you want to mess with that, you're more than welcome to.
Right.
I'll bring it. But anyway, I have been picking that guitar up and plugging it through that amp straight every day, and I play it for about 20 minutes.
Awesome.
So I've had the guitar for about a year and a half, and I never really played it until I plugged it into this amp, and it sounds so good through this little amp. I'm not blowing my eardrums out, and I'm playing the guitar a lot.
Nice.
So it's like I'm getting my chops back.
You can turn it up, and it will get pretty,
Yeah, but it still won't blast your ears out.
No.
It's no 100-watt Marshall.
No.
But it's a safe amp, and gosh, I mean, it's one of the best amps I've ever owned.
I think it's a good combo.
Perfect combo.
Nice.
That's great.
I love it.
We'll have to get in touch with Kenny.
Now, are those humbuckers or P90s?
They are humbuckers, and but they have the screen.
Yeah.
So. And the neck must be like a low 7K, in the bridge I think it's maybe in the 9 or 10K. It just sounds so good. Well, I like to beef up the bridges, the pickup bridge.
I think that makes sense.
In a bolt-on neck guitar.
Oh.
In that kind of style guitar. It's a bolt-on neck. So I think the bridge pickup just needs a little more oomph on those kind of guitars.
I think even if it's a set neck, it should be hotter too.
Yeah, maybe.
Less amplitude in the strings.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
Amplitude. All right.
Oscillation.
How about
Very
you,
nice.
Todd?
Well, I posted a video on our group channel on Facebook. If you haven't checked it out, go check out Guitar Knobs group on Facebook. And it was by J. Leonard J., who is a super nice chap. I'd actually like to have him on the show. He posts some great videos, and this one in particular was about mids in your playing and like your room versus a gig and stuff. And it's not anything we haven't heard before. But what I love about when people do go ahead and say, yes, this has been put out there, but I'm putting my spin on it. He went through and was talking about dipping the mids, and that's what caught my attention. I was like, wait, what do you mean dipping the mids? Because all we ever hear about is like boosting, the roof on the mids for in a live situation. And he was suggesting dipping the middle of the mids and actually pushing up your low mids, which is 200 to 400 hertz, right? Mm-hmm. Like on your little graphic EQ, just pushing that one, and boosting your upper mids at like the 15 to 3,000 hertz range.
So a W.
Kind of, yeah. Just in the mids. Mm-hmm. Not a W in the full spectrum, but just in the mid zone. And I was like, that's really interesting. And then he even went as far to say, like, depending on what your bass sounds like and, how your drums are tuned and what kind of singer you have, you might want to not boost both of those. Maybe you just boost the low mids. Maybe you just boost the high mids. And so I was just playing with that. And it was remarkable the different sounds I was able to get just by doing that instead of trying to go for a big giant mid hump, which I wasn't really thrilled about. So,
see, back in my day, everybody did a U or a V. We basically scooped out the mids, and it's interesting that it's come kind of full circle now, where you're basically beefing those mids up.
Yeah,
interesting.
Well, but that might have also been. Well, never. I'm not going to speculate on why that might have been.
That was the 1980s.
Yeah. Well, but if you think about it, earlier, the effects, you really, a tube screamer, and you're probably going out of Marshall, and you're probably going out of humbuckers and stuff like that. So it's like, that's all like super MIDI anyway, right?
Yeah.
So
if you're going into a Marshall,
if you're overbearing on the mids,
you're talking about what dreams are made of now.
Yeah. Anyways, if you're trying to get a tone that isn't that.
Yeah.
So all kinds of, the tones are out there. You got to find them.
I like the tones.
Yeah. All right. We want to give a big fat thank you to music producer and recording engineer John Fennell for his support with our show. He's been a guest on our show and is a guitarist himself at heart, so he knows how to get the tones you need.
He's an all-around nice guy, too.
And an all-around nice guy.
He's got a heck of a great
John
studio.
John produced my personal upcoming album right here at Relay, where we're recording right now.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely just blown away.
Good experience,
by not only the results we had, but the handling we got.
He made you sound good.
He helped us through the whole process, from pre-production to recording and engineering to mixing and mastering. And unlike others that I've worked with in the past, it was the attention to detail and the care of us being in a unfamiliar surrounding, having to like pour our hearts out in our music, and he was really attentive to that.
Well, he's also got a great ear. I mean, you were telling me some of the stories when you were recording. He said, talk to your drummer and different things like that, bass player.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that is critical in getting a good final product.
It really is. And he also does this offsite or remote. So we want to say thank you to him for that. John can help you find the best way to tackle your recording project and bring your music to life. Check him out at johnfennell.com and relayrecording.com.
That's right.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. All right, everybody, let's do this.
Yes.
Guitar Setup 101.
Are we going to focus on electric guitar setup?
We
or
are.
Acoustic guitar.
This is
electric
guitar setup. I should be more specific to that.
Electric.
All right, Chase, take it away.
Lucky.
No.
Am I taking it?
All right, that was a great show. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hey.
All right.
What do you do?
All right. So we're going to I'm going to give just a brief agenda so it isn't just like, where are we going with all this?
Yeah.
We're going to kind of, first off, Chase is going to address the 5 main sort of elements of a setup. And we're not going to, it isn't, like I said, it's not going to be like first you do this and then you do that. We're going to take some time to understand what these things are and why they matter. Then we're going to go into how they
How to make
interact
them
with each
better.
other. That's right. And then we're going to discuss some tools and stuff and how to move forward if, with other things. All right. Chase,
Yes.
tell the world right now what those 5 things are in order.
Oh man, I'm trying to go off this list we talked about. Okay, basically, for guitar setup, you've got kind of like 5.
Hold on. You got to be more
Right
on
in
mic,
the-
so
Okay.
watch your mic. If you need to put it down like this, pull your mic down.
towards it.
There you go. Good.
There you go. Articulating arm.
Put that bass in your face.
Yeah. Okay. Hey.
Hey. All right. So 5 things for guitar setup that are kind of like the elements that kind of come together. Because the thing is, it's not one of these things. It's kind of all of them working together. But you've got your nut, you've got your frets, you've got your action, your relief, and your intonation.
Right.
And that's kind of like the gist of everything that you've got to cover. Now, it can go even more in depth. You can start adjusting pole pieces and pickup heights and things like that. Something that's too high can actually choke things out because the magnetic pull kind of stops the string from vibrating. So but that's a whole other, like, whew, that's not 101.
That's
like,
102.
That's 102.
And
Yeah.
and for the record, Chase has the dubious honor of doing this because I wanted to pull in somebody that literally does this on a daily basis.
Yeah.
How many guitars you set up in a week, do you think?
25, 30
Cool.
ish.
Okay. So, you've done this a few
varies,
times.
yeah.
All right.
Less than 1 million.
Yeah. More than 250.
Yes.
Less than 1,500.
Yes, exactly.
Sounds official.
So those actual elements, we're going to just hit on each one really quick. We're not going to get into the entanglements of how they all work with each other until we kind of understand
Or
what they
against
are.
each other.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yep, absolutely.
What they are and why they matter.
Okay.
The nut,
Well, actually, I'm going to start with frets.
the frets.
Here's why. Here's why. No, I know the nut was at the top of the list
He's fretting
when
the
we were
nut.
doing this.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is your frets are your foundation. So everything else builds off of that. So which we discovered with your Viking
That's
yesterday
correct.
when we were fooling around with it. You're like, hey, well, can we? I'm like, hey, you got a high fret here. You're like, can we just? I'm like, well, we can try that. We'll tweak this. We'll tweak that. And what happened was we ended up making the guitar play like garbage, and you still had fret buzz on that fret.
Yes.
Because of high fret. So your fret work is very important because that kind of sets the baseline that everything else can be optimized to.
Right.
So if you've got a couple of high frets, you can only set your action so low because it's going to be determined by the fret next to it, essentially.
Right.
So it's very important that all of your frets are leveled and dressed properly.
Right. That's not just a thing that people who set up guitars say you need to do so they can get more money out of it.
It's not at all. And depending on the luthier that you choose, and it's important to find a guy that knows what he's doing with that stuff because you can screw that stuff up in a hurry. Everybody's a YouTube expert, so it's important to find a guy that does this. Ask around, find guys that you like. If you're in the area, I would be happy to talk to anytime somebody's in the area. It's free for like a consultation to come in and check it out. But I'm also not the only game in town. There's other guys out there too.
Right. Find one that you feel comfortable with.
Yes.
And we'll touch on that even more a little bit later.
Yeah, that's exactly. So frets are basically your foundation. From there, you can set your relief, which is the bow in your neck. Ideally, you want that to be pretty minimal, but it still kind of needs to be there. Like dead flat doesn't always work in every scenario. Depending on the radius of your fretboard and other things, you need a little bit more. If you've got like, say, like an old telly, so you've got like a 7 1/4 radius, you're going to need a little more relief in there to allow that amplitude or oscillation of the string to kind of clear. Strings don't actually just move side to side. They kind of work in like a figure 8 as you pluck them. So you kind of have to give relief. It's relief for the string to kind of oscillate is what the relief is. From there, you've got your action, which is what your string height is. And that is kind of the distance from the bottom of your string, most commonly measured at the 12th fret on a guitar. So the top of the 12th fret to the bottom of your string is kind of where you measure your action.
Why does that matter?
That is the distance that you have to press the string down before it frets to make a note. And it can matter because if it's too tall, you effectively bend the string before it frets, and that can cause things to pull sharp, which is circling back up to the nuts, which is where you want to kind of start.
We just saw that with John. John had a bass here.
Yeah. Oh,
and
you can stick your thumb
I said,
under the strings on that guy.
Chase, you should check out this bass because the action is crazy high. Now, before, like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I didn't understand that it wasn't just a playability thing. It actually, you will be out of tune before you even hit the note.
That's exactly it.
Which is like, oh.
It's all about the geometry of a guitar.
It really is. A lot of it is. It's geometry is the perfect word for it. And that's it. It's understanding that. Like, none of it's really rocket science, but it's all geometry.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Okay.
Math magicians.
Yes.
Pythagorean theorem and all.
A duck is a bird is not a duck.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as we were talking about with the action, so that affects that more across the neck as a whole.
Right.
Now in the nut slots though, that same concept can be applied there too. If your nut slots aren't cut deep enough, meaning that the slot doesn't bring the string close enough to the first fret. So too deep, you'll get a sizzle on there on open notes. You'll get that kind of tone across there. But if they're not deep enough, you effectively bend things sharp when you're in the cowboy chord range. So there's a real kind of fine balance there of getting things right with that.
We're going to get deeper into that.
Deeper into the nuts.
Soon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Somewhere there's a...
Just keep going.
Okay. I'm moving along like I'm in 4th grade here or something. This is ridiculous. Wait, that's a little young. 7th grade.
There you go.
Wherever.
We laugh at
somewhere there.
We laugh at 7th and 8th grade
right,
things.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
There's a fart joke somewhere.
Yeah, there's nuts everywhere.
Every day.
Okay, yeah, that kind of, I think that covers the 5 things. So what do we got here? We got understanding 1 through 5.
Yes, exactly.
So which one would you like to talk about?
Let's talk about the frets because
that's where you started.
That's where you started.
It is. So the frets are important. So within a fret, so you've got your scale length, and I didn't do the thing I told you I was going to do with that yesterday to like pregame this, and I should have. Anyway, your scale length is kind of, what do you got there? Is there a neck in there? What?
We got a neck right here.
We've got
a neck right there.
This is what's that called?
It's a Frankenstein because it's a bolt-on.
That's right.
Very cool. Nice skinny
Bolt-on.
frets.
Yeah.
See, I got a bolt-on neck.
Yeah, that's a vintage style 7 1/4 radius.
Yep. Nice and round, nice skinny frets. So we've got our neck here.
Yes.
Whoops. Where was I? Oh.
Talking about frets.
So your frets. So when this neck is set at flat, and you can set that a couple of different ways. Todd and I were kind of talking about that yesterday, either using a notch straight edge for the wood or a normal straight edge.
So just for clarity, a notched straight edge, like if you go looking on StewMac or Amazon or something, and it's like looking for any kind of tool that's going to check how straight your neck is.
You're looking for flatness is what you're trying to say.
So they either sell them in, it literally looks like a strip of aluminum, like a big heavy strip of aluminum. Or
in the UK, aluminium.
Or they're notched on one side to fit a Fender length scale or a
Gibson.
Yeah, or a Gibson on the other side.
Two most common are 25 and a half and 24 and
those notches essentially allow the actual level to basically to only touch the actual fretboard.
Yes.
Not sit on top of the frets.
Not sit on top of the frets.
That's correct.
And there's different schools of thought in the what's the old adage, there's more than one way to boil a potato. Is that it?
That's one of them.
Something about
skin a cat.
Yeah, something with a cat, and if it's not your cat, anyway. So you can also level off the top of the frets with a non-notched straight edge. And it depends on. For me, I tend to not use a notch straight edge. I go off of the frets. And the reason for that is because you can have a little bit of a hump worked into this, and unless I'm ready to get
the actual wood.
In the actual wood.
Okay.
Yep.
So if the fretboard wasn't properly leveled before the frets went in, you can end up with humps in there. So, and if you're trying to set that truss rod adjustment to get that level, and then it sends your frets all over the place. Sometimes you end up wearing down a whole lot of fret before you can kind of get everything leveled. So what I shoot for is relative to what the neck's wanting to do. So the truss rod's in there, the neck's been glued up, it's got a little bit of a hump in it, and it's there. But the frets kind of follow along with that. So you get it set as flat as you possibly can with your truss rod and your straight edge. Then you come through, you mark the tops, and then you come through and you knock just the tips off of the tops.
Right.
Tippy tops.
Yep.
After that, it's very important that you re-crown the frets. And the reason for that is because what happens is after you remove some of that material, the fret shrinks and it actually gets a little bit wider. And the middle of each fret is where your intonation is set on your scale length as it kind of adjusts for the intervals between the fret and your saddle to make the correct notes, essentially.
Right.
Man, I'm getting real.
That's okay.
Okay.
You're saying you speak the truth.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, but I'm not great at this.
You're doing fine. You're doing
Okay.
fine. But I want to. You pointed out something that, again, there was a lot of like common sense stuff that I was like, dang it, how did I not think of that?
Okay.
When we were checking the level on
Yes.
my neck, you just sort of nonchalantly said you really are checking the middle because the neck is built, the neck is in place, the truss rod's in there. You're not going to affect any kind of change in what the geometry near the where the neck is set or bolted. You're also not going to affect anything right up at the nut.
Yeah. Yes. So, like, what's going on with these frets from like 12 to 21 doesn't have a whole lot of bearing on what's going on 1 through 5.
Right.
You know, so you want to make sure everything's relatively level within, almost segments of each other. Now, across the whole neck, you want everything to be flat.
Right.
Ideally, everything's perfectly flat.
Right.
But the point is, if these are, if these 5 frets on the end of the neck are 1/1000th of an inch taller than the 5 frets on the other end of the neck, those don't interact with each other.
Right.
You're not going to fret the first fret and the 21st fret at the same time unless you're, Stretch Armstrong,
Right.
Or Mr. Fantastic.
Or Steve Vai.
Yeah, no kidding. Right.
So that was another really interesting point because you then were checking after you made that point. You started checking the relative, 3 frets at a time, essentially.
Yeah, so you can use a tool called a fret rocker. There's a lot of different tools you can use, but essentially you want a perfectly flat piece of metal, plastic. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's dead flat. And now you can't use like a popsicle stick, and it needs to be perfectly flat. But so what happens is you'll work 3 frets at a time, and you'll make sure that thing touches those 3 frets. And if it rocks on one, then what happens is you can find a high fret.
Right.
Now that high fret will ring just fine. But what happens is 1 fret further up the neck, further down the neck, what'll happen is that high fret will actually choke out that note. So if
that's what was happening on my
and
guitar.
that's what was happening. And that's where I showed you on yours. I think it was you had 7 was high, so when you'd hit 6, it was just Buzz City, and then you move up to 7, and it's clear as a bell.
Yeah.
But you drop back to 5, and it's clear. You go up to 8, and it's clear.
Right.
But and we talked about, well, can we just adjust the truss rod? So we adjust it, same problem. And all we did was we just made the action higher and gave it more relief. So that's why it's important. That's why your frets are your foundation.
Right.
Like you need those to be perfect because that dictates how low you can go. Because everybody comes in and you say, hey, nice to meet you. I'm here for a setup. What would you like? I want it as low as it'll possibly go without any buzz. Without fail, that's what everybody thinks they want. They're not always correct. And that's also why it's important to get to know your luthier and talk to him about your playing style. Exactly. If you dig in and you're just beating on those strings, and I set that up low, no matter what, that's going to buzz because
or
you're
even
just hammering on
even
them.
if you're not hammering or beating them up. If, like I was explaining, like I'm not doing all the wheelie things, and I'm not really light fingered, so I'm a little heavier handed, and I play a lot of like big like power chords and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that means that all those strings are ringing simultaneously.
Yep.
So a lower action is probably going to, like, if I'm too low, if I'm like super slinky low, then I'm going to have an issue. right?
Yeah, most likely you're going to end up with some fret buzz because you're hitting the strings hard enough that they're just their oscillation pattern's huge at that point. Now that said, if you've got a very light touch, and you're not squeezed, like you don't have the death grip on your fretboard, and you're kind of precise and quick with your picking, then I can set that very low because everything's moving nice and tight. You're like a well-oiled machine at that point. So your tolerances can be much closer because you are the biggest variable in how your setup's going to work. And that's why it's important to talk with guys. I've had guys come in and you'll set everything up and you'll play through it, and they'll come in and they'll play and they're like, oh yeah, man, this is great. Then they get home and they're like, all right, now I'm going to play. So they fire up their Marshall, they've got it on 11, they're making their neighbors mad. It's 2:00 in the morning, they've had 3 beers, and next thing you know, like, man, this thing buzzes everywhere. And I'm like, well, you're buzzed. No, I'm just joking. Zing. But anyway,
there was something else that you mentioned that I think was another sort of aha. I can't believe I had this many ahas in one sitting, but I'm glad that I did because I learned, and that's what this is all about. So you mentioned, hey, you got some fret wear up here. It's like, okay, we've all heard that, like, oh, you've got fret wear, and you noticed that there was I worked in a couple grooves into my frets. I've never really understood, what the big deal is with that, other than it's like, well, it's, it doesn't look great, and it might like catch if I'm bending on it or something. But you made an excellent point, because if that groove is lower
than the fret in front of it, then you'll start getting
is higher.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Then you start to get buzz.
Thing. And the thing is the longer you, and that's the other bad thing is guys are like, I'm not noticing any problems, and they let it go and they let it go and they let it go. Next thing you know, this thing's like super deep. And then you get to the point where you have to do like a partial refret or a whole refret in some cases, depending on the player. But if you kind of catch that stuff early, it's part of it's like a maintenance. So if you catch it early, like, hey, I'm starting to get a little bit of grooves here, and capos are the worst. Guys that play with capos, that really damages your frets because it's squeezing so much harder than what you're going to be squeezing, unless you're Todd Novak. That guy squeezes some strings. We discovered that yesterday too.
Did I really?
Yeah, you do. You do. Which is another thing that to kind of think about is so tall frets, short frets, skinny frets.
That
fat
was
frets.
another really is like
the
idea that if you have a taller fretted instrument and you do have a heavier hand
and you squeeze really
when
hard.
you squeeze really hard to get down to the fretboard, now you're way out of tune.
Now you've bent everything sharp again.
Right.
So that's something to consider too. Is like when you're shopping for a new guitar, or if say it is time for a refret, you might not want to do the big scallop jumbo frets if you're a guy that has a heavy grip. You might want to go with something a little more vintage spec with a shorter profile to it, because you're less likely to bend things sharp when you grab a hold of it.
Jared said, "Oh yeah," by the way.
Yeah.
How about that?
So
I'm learning. I just learned.
Yeah.
I learned.
Well, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
good, man. That's cool.
Thanks-
All right, I
thanks,
feel like I'm
old
doing
buddy.
some good here.
Yeah.
Okay.
You are, man.
Well,
You're
I
doing
get
great.
nervous about these things, man.
You shouldn't.
Yeah.
You're doing fine.
Well, some of my guitars.
Is he doing
have-
fine, everybody?
Yeah, some of my guitars have
Not
the
the other
taller frets
everybody's.
on them.
I'm doing
You're
fine.
right here.
So when I press hard down on the fret, it changes the pitch. The pitch changes. Yeah.
Now if you're like a super killer guitar player, you can play into that. You can actually add that to part of your
Exactly.
repertoire
Gonna
of,
now.
the
Dynamics.
the tones in the fingers. There's truth in that.
I'm gonna make it happen.
Yeah. But that's things to consider.
Yeah.
But if your guy's worth his salt, you can talk to him about those things, and he can ask you about his playing, and then you guys can kind of dial in the setup according to your playing style and what the guitar needs. Again, like we were talking about the relief and your action and things like that. The fretboard radius can kind of come into play with some of that. Yeah, that's probably about enough on frets, though, right?
I think so.
Okay,
Got the gist
You
of
covered
it.
it.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much everything.
Stainless steel or
No, don't even go into that.
That's not a 101 thing.
Yeah, I mean,
We did actually.
If you're going through frets, I had a guy, local region. He's a musician, Aren't we all?
Sure.
Anyway, but he had brought in a guitar for a refret. Scout fretboard's super pain in the butt to do. But so got the frets in there and stuff, and then a little later on he had some wear again, and I'm like, well, hey man, like he's like, man, we just did this, and I'm like, well, maybe we should go to stainless steel. So if you're somebody that goes through frets a lot, stainless steel might be the answer for you because they wear a lot longer. There typically is a little more expense involved in refretting because it's substantially harder material, so it's harder on your tools. But the process itself is essentially the same as a nickel silver would be.
So have you ever had a customer come in?
I love custard.
I like it too. It's high in cholesterol. But have you ever had a customer come in and the frets are worn down, right? But he just kind of dug into the fretboard. So would you, of course, you take all the frets out if you're going to refret it, and then would you kind of level that fretboard?
Yes.
That's part of the process.
It is. And you've got to be careful with that too, because depending on how deep the wear is, I did a refinish, restoration is probably a better word for it, on a 59 Jazzmaster a while back. Cool guitar, by the way. There's some pictures somewhere of it. Okay. That was kind of the scenario with that. The frets were totally worn out and there were huge ruts in the board. So when we pulled the frets, I had to re-radius the board to kind of re-level that. And it's interesting too, because you find out, and that's where you kind of find some of that stuff. Like we had talked about humps in the board and whether the board was, worn correctly to begin with, but the wear was actually where the biggest issue was. We settled on leaving a little bit of it there because just a touch. I mean, it was a family guitar, that was purchased new. An uncle had refinished it in the 70s in shop class, and then
of course
somebody else ended up with it. But it was kind of cool because like all the stamps were there. But aside from like some what looked like paint brushed on white enamel, overall it was a cool guitar.
Yeah.
So cleaned it up, brought it back to bare wood, did a shot it in nitro with a burst, and then checked it to kind of give it, to make it look correct with everything else.
Yeah.
But so the board though, we eliminated everything that was like major, but there were a couple where if you got too far, now all of a sudden you're having to replace inlays, and so there's kind of a fine line there on how deep you can go with that, especially since it was a 7 1/4 radius on that guy too.
Right.
It's so round that you start losing a little bit of that shoulder there.
And you also have to be careful. Some of the Fender ones that had the veneer,
you'll
rosewood
burn right
board
through there, and your truss rod's popping up on you. Yeah,
Oh, man.
Crazy
Yeah.
pants.
Oh yeah.
All right, what's next?
Okay, so after you have adjusted your frets and you've got that guy looking good, feeling good, I like to, while the neck is still pretty darn flat, you'll string that guy up because you do the fret work obviously with strings off. Well, not always. There's man. We need to do a 102 for like all the different ways that these things can be. Anyway.
Okay, number 2.
Okay,
The nut.
is your nut. Yes. The nut's important for several reasons.
And that is, just for clarity, that is the little strip between the fretboard and the headstock that
Yes.
your strings are sitting in.
Yes. Should be made of bone.
Should be,
That's
but
my opinion.
Often aren't. More often than not.
Yeah. I was waiting on
heavy
that
metal
one to come
brass,
in.
baby.
Yeah. But you don't want plastic.
Yeah. Why not?
Well, here's the thing. So if you come in and you're like, hey man, this thing's got tuning stability issues, and I look out there and you've got like this plastic nut that's, a mile high, your strings are a quarter of an inch
And
down
that's going to be found on more economy guitars.
Yes, that's very much in the economy
First
range.
X.
Yeah, bingo. So
well, no, I mean, like that can go all the. I mean, that
it can go
Hagstrom's
fairly.
got
The
plastic one.
Hagstrom's got plastic on it. Yeah, we should switch that out to bone.
Yeah.
But
a lot of Gibsons and Martins
Yeah.
have plastic.
yeah, micarta and stuff like that too.
Yeah, micarta is-
yeah.
So
glorified plastic.
Yeah.
There's also, you can find ones with Tusk, TUSQ, which is
It's a synthetic.
bone kind of thing.
Typically graphite impregnated with
Right.
some of that stuff too. So bone isn't the end all be all. Brass, they're all good options.
Yeah.
Except for plastic.
Right.
The big thing with plastic is it's not quite hard enough, and what happens is your strings will kind of wear into there, and they'll kind of, so if you look at your string, it's not too unsimilar to looking at like a serrated knife edge.
Yeah.
Except they're kind of blunted essentially. So what can happen is those strings will kind of wear into that nut a little bit, and it'll create like a little bit of like rumble strips.
Yeah.
on the highway, right? You hit this, you know.
Yeah.
So same concept. So, you know, you're playing your guitar and you bend a little bit or something, and so that thing will skip up a strip, and now your string kind of sticks in there, and it doesn't want to like move and kind of go back to where it is. So it can kind of cause like some irregularities in your tuning. So that's why it's important that your slots are kind of filed very nicely. You don't want them to be too deep. So like on wound strings particularly, if you can see if the string is if the strings are so low that you could put 2 strings in there and still be like in the nut slot, that you need to shave some of the top of that nut off. Ideally, you want your unwound strings to be basically about the same, the slot when it's set relative to your first fret and the depth is correct. You kind of want those to be, if it's a 10, you want that slot to be about 10 deep. If it's a 46, you want it to be around 23
As deep as the string is.
As deep as the string is on unwound strings. On wound strings, about half the depth. And the reason why is because it kind of creates a cradle. So if you go up past that halfway point, you're now at the widest point. So at this point, the string is always going to be wider than the nut slot would be at its widest point, and that'll avoid it from pinching on the sides also. So that's kind of a nice...
So that if you are doing bends, it's not going to get hung up.
Exactly. So you kind of want your nut kind of tuned up to and string gauge. Matching your string gauge is important too. Some guys think that they don't need to use like a notch file, so they'll come in here and these strings, the slots are just a mile wide, and you'll start hearing like pings. Hey, I do a bend and it's ping, ping, and it's
sliding around.
It's sliding around in that nut slot. So the nut's pretty important too. It's easily probably second most important next to the frets. In like setting that baseline for how good everything else can be. If
just switching your actual nut out for like a quality hand polish, those are all done like by hand to spec for a guitar.
Yep.
That can greatly improve the tone and the playability of your guitar.
And even if you're buying, say you're trying a Tusk nut or something, and you order it, and it's like, hey, I bought a Tusk for my Epiphone. It should be, put it on. That's not the case. It still needs to be fitted and set to your guitar by someone who knows what they're doing and has the correct tools to do the job. That's a pretty important thing because all guitars are different. So everything's going to be slightly off. And when you're talking about really optimizing your setup, you're working in thousandths of an inch, and there's no way that a manufacturer can spec that many things. So they kind of get it in the ballpark, where it's minimal final fitment work and fine tuning to get it fit your guitar properly. And there are a lot of good options out there. Bone's my favorite because I like the way it looks. It's traditional. It's nice and hard. You can polish the slots nice and slick, and they don't wear out really quickly like plastic or something would.
It's interesting because you can get a Tusk nut on Amazon for like $10 bucks, $12, and then if you get it, and I've done this before. And I've got and you start working with it, and if you put it in and it's like kind of like jiggling or rocking or something, if your first thing is, well, if I just load it up a little bit more with glue on that side,
it's like, that's much more glue.
That'll be all right.
And you also, in all likelihood, don't have all of the right tools to actually get that very those small incremental differences, right?
Yeah.
So it's not impossible, and I encourage that just try it. It's not going to kill you.
If you've got like an inexpensive classical or an acoustic or something like that, you're not going to really ruin things by changing out that.
Just
Well, I mean, I think the major difference is depending on how the nut is fitted, because Fenders fit differently than a Gibson, and every other brand.
Martin, you've got that slanted bottom on it.
I mean, they make them differently, and I think as Chase said, the factory can't make it the exact depth and everything, because all these things they may have slots in them, but it's just kind of a guideline,
right?
And you eventually have to either deepen them or whatever. But the point I was going to make is with a setup, you have the ability, if you have someone that is actually making the nut, you can say, I feel like my fingers are a little bit cramped at the nut.
Yeah.
You can widen where those strings actually sit. I mean, within reason. You can't have them so they're flying off the edge of the fretboard.
That's a good point. I hadn't mentioned, but that is so when you are making a nut from scratch like that, you can adjust your string spacing there. So that's a very good point.
Are you satisfied now, Tony?
I'm very satisfied with
Dude,
myself.
you guys should chime in too, because I feel like I'm just rambling along here. And
I am a pickup guy.
okay,
That is about
Okay.
it.
okay,
He's a pickup artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
mean,
Mongo like pickup.
When we
All
get
right.
closer to that area of the guitar, I'll start
oh
chatting.
yeah, there we go.
Okay, so continue on the net here.
I mean, for the most
Is
part,
that pretty much it?
That's really it, man. You want to make sure that your slots are cut relative. Relative to what your first fret height is. So you want to measure what from the fretboard to the top of your first fret, and essentially you kind of want to match that or give it a little bit extra clearance. I like
Right.
to give it about 1/100 of an inch on the high E and about 2/100 of an inch on the low E, and kind of graduate that scale a little bit across to just allow for a little wiggle room.
Right.
But that's close enough that you typically won't pull anything sharp.
Right.
So when you fret the first fret, it's not going, a few cents.
Yeah, and if you
sharp.
just blanked out and got lost and started thinking about like the car next to you right there, just get it to a guy who does it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a little lube also is good to put in the nut, right?
It is good to lube up your nuts.
Yes,
It is.
So
A little
the
graphite in
pencil,
there.
little,
Yeah,
like
pencil
just
works.
a mechanical pencil.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
what I was using.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Some people use chapstick, which
Ew.
is
Yeah.
that
Why not?
No.
Yeah.
I
That's
use a little graphite grease.
graphite
I get
grease
it
is
from
great.
StuMac, and
Okay.
it's nice. It kind of sticks in the slot a little bit.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice to use periodically. When you're getting a setup, every other string change,
Yeah.
just as needed.
Yeah.
And that can alleviate a little bit of like slippage here and there. But if it's really hanging up, and a good way to check that too is you should always tune up when you're tuning. I mean,
Right.
that's pretty common knowledge for a lot
Right.
of people. So
if you're sharp, go way flat.
yeah, and then
tune
bring it back
to
up.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So and I was showing Todd this, like if you've got a pretty decent responsive tuner, also that's another thing. When you're doing setups, you need a quality tuner. You're not going to do it with like a headstock snark. Like you need to invest and get a nice tuner.
If somebody is trying to do this at home, which again, don't do this on a 59 Les Paul or anything that you have.
The
laying
one that
around.
you have in your closet.
But a lot of online sources and things recommend using like a feeler gauge. Like you go to an auto parts store and you can actually add,
like
as you
6
said,
bucks
about
on
that's actually what the exact process when I'm cutting the slots to depth that I use is
you put a feeler gauge right up against the nut, and then when the file hits it, it feels differently.
yeah, you'll hear it too. It'll go from you hear it catch that
and
steel.
you stop there.
Right.
Immediately stop.
If you go any further,
It's going to be
You
Sizzle
start
City.
over.
Yep,
Right.
that's exactly
You get a new
it.
nut.
Yeah, you're either starting over or in a pinch you can get a little CA glue and some baking soda to kind of touch some things up if you
Or
have
top
to.
ramen.
Yeah, no kidding. dude.
Right.
That's
Super
the
good.
most
Right.
ridiculous.
So great.
I'm like, what else can we make?
People
an
are making
epoxy
guitars
out
out of ramen.
Let's see.
Make a ramen guitar.
Next up, we're gonna go to the action. No, we're gonna go to the relief. Hit relief.
Okay.
Oh, we went from nuts to relief.
Nuts to
Yes.
relief. Oh man, this is bad news. Okay, so your relief is if you lay a straight edge coming back across. So that's why it's good to have a straight edge. So
So we're talking truss rod, people. Just
Yeah.
so if everybody's
Right.
going like, when are they gonna talk about truss rods?
Yes.
okay, and let's use one caveat when it comes to the truss rod. If for some reason you are adjusting the truss rod and it will not go any further,
stop.
and take it to someone.
Yes.
Yep.
Because it is very easy once you get to a point to actually bust,
Absolutely.
and then
It's
you
no
throw,
good.
you throw the neck away.
Yeah.
Yep.
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 So go ahead.
Yeah. So
My
That's
grandpa
a
did that, by the way.
broke a truss rod.
And he's buried with that guitar now.
Oh wow, it's actually kind of a cool story though. Like what I mean. It's a sad story on multiple ways because Grandpa's buried.
He was 90.
And
It was his
there's
time.
there's a guitar with a broken truss rod, but
I bought him that guitar.
dude,
Yeah.
even cooler.
Yeah.
That's nice.
You can take this out. I don't care.
No, you leave it.
I'll leave
It's
it in.
good.
Put it
Leave
in the thing.
Leave
in
it
the
in.
end.
Leave
Good
it in.
times.
Put it
Good
in.
times.
Put it
Go
in
ahead.
the end.
Yeah. So the relief is basically your measurement. So if you lay a flat straight edge from your last fret, whether it's 21 frets, 24 frets, 27 frets in some cases. I had this really pretty wild ESP Horizon in a while back. That
Oh,
had like,
wow.
Kind of like a partial. Dude, it was cool. It was nice. It was Japanese at its finest. It was cool.
Three
but
extra frets.
Yeah, it was pretty wild, but only like partials. So it had like neck pickup was kind of slanted, and the fretboard it was cool. If it's your jam, it was super cool. And then to the first fret, so you lay your straight edge across there. And ideally, you want to do this with the guitar sitting upright in the playing position. That's not always the case, but what I found works for me pretty well is just don't have your neck on a neck rest. Let your neck kind of leave the body on a flat surface and let the neck kind of overhang so that there's no weight being applied to the neck. Lay your straight edge across there, and this also needs to be done with the strings on the guitar tuned up to pitch so that all of your tension is correct. Because all of your strings, that's kind of what your truss rod does, is so all of your strings have approximately, I'm probably wrong on this, 16 pounds of tension, ballpark, if I'm
1 million pounds of pressure.
It's somewhere in that range, 13, 16 psi, pounds of tension on them times 6. So there's a pretty good amount.
There's a lot.
There is, and that's trying to fold your guitar in half like a taco.
Yeah.
So that pulls your neck forward. Now the truss rod counteracts that and flattens that tension back out, putting an opposite force against it. So, and when it does that, it flattens out. So if you've got like a trampoline, like you jump on the trampoline, it dips down, you come back up, and it flattens back out. The truss rod tries to flatten that back out.
Right.
So as you're adjusting your truss rod with the neck kind of hung off, strung to tension, you lay your straight edge across there down the middle of the neck and back to the feeler gauges. You slip that under. I like to work right between like 7 and 9, 7, 8, 9, right in that range, and kind of check where it's
7,
at.
8, 9.
Frets. And
Fret 7, 8, and 9.
Fret 7, 8, 9, right in that range. Now, depending on where your heel is, what your scale length is, but that's pretty darn close to the middle of the actual the deflection that happens within. Yeah, that's exactly it. So you want to try to work right in the middle of that. Yeah.
Geometry.
There you go.
Yeah.
We're all
Riding
about geometry
motorcycles.
tonight.
Subject I didn't
So
learn in
let me
school.
ask you this now. Do
Okay.
you typically fret on the first and the last to check your relief?
Well, I use a straight edge.
Okay.
But yes, for a quick just like let's check it, you can use your string essentially, fret it at the first fret, and then so I like to go like 2 frets out of the body, like on an acoustic, for instance, or like on this telly neck that we've got here. The big heel kind of starts at about 15.
Okay.
So somewhere around 15, 16, kind of like you can fret both of that, and then you can kind of tap with your thumb a little bit. And if you can't hear it go tick 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 tick, then you don't have any relief. If you tap it and it doesn't make you can't hear it go pop, 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 and kind of tap against the fret, you don't have any relief. But it's hard to measure that and hold that down. So but alternatively, you can throw a capo on the first fret and then fret there and use a feeler gauge that way too. But the feeler gauge is kind of like the key thing here. I use a straight edge and lay it across there.
Okay.
And then measure underneath if I can slip that feeler gauge underneath there, then I'm in good shape.
Okay.
And it varies, like anything else. It kind of depends on what the radius of the fretboard is, what the player plays, what string gauge, all of that kind of
The
comes
style of music. Even.
Yeah, all of that comes into the equation. A lot of times, if it's like an Ibanez type guitar with a pretty flat fretboard, I can get around 4/1000ths of an inch clearance, which is pretty close to flat. That's not very much. On a lot of like Gibson stuff, I'm around 6/1000ths, and on like a telly, I get closer to like 8/1000ths. It's that round fretboard. There's just not really any way around it.
Yep.
That's kind of that guy.
I think one thing else to point there before again, we talked about this yesterday, and I kind of look at this like when you decide that you want to get more involved with your guitar, it's kind of like the adage of don't ride a motorcycle if you can't fix it on the side of the road. Right, an older motorcycle, right?
Yeah.
It's a mentality of like know your instrument, know the pieces and parts, what they do. When that will allow you to also know when they're not doing what they're supposed to do right.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Just because you might not feel comfortable doing a fret level and address, you might not feel comfortable doing the nut, but having an understanding of what's going on helps you talk to me about what's happening. You come in, you're like, hey man, this thing's doing, because like 1 in every 5 people that come in are like, I don't know, man, it's broke, fix it. And I'm like, well, what's it doing? Like, it's making it. I don't know. Here, that's what I pay
Right.
you for, you know.
Right.
And it's like,
Right.
okay, well, cool. And then you kind of got to try to like go through and
Right.
I know what to look for because I've got essentially the same
Yeah.
list that I go down. But it's nice when somebody come in and they're like, hey, man, I'm getting some like real heavy fret buzz on like my high E string between 17 and 19. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's start there.
Right.
And that could be something as simple as like, hey, you know, your saddle's set a little bit low. Let's bring that up. So there's
Yeah, and
it helps
especially
to
when
kind
you go
of-
through the seasons and you have it's dry. If you're in an area that you have humidity and things are too dry during the winter or something, your truss rod can get some action there. And
Whether-
if you know that's something that you can say like, hey, I know this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm familiar with it. I've taken the time to learn about it and to do it right, so that seasonally you can make those little adjustments and be at
Yeah,
one.
and it's
Be
going to
at
be
one
a
with your guitar.
quarter of a turn or less either
and then you're
direction.
done.
Yeah.
But on that note, the quarter of a turn and the whole truss rod thing, again, this is one of those things where I was like, right, why hadn't I been thinking like this? So put new strings on. I'm going through my whole mental setup, and this all started from that string change to nines. Okay, so I put the strings on.
That's a solid point too. How I talked about the tension.
Yeah.
The amount of pressure between a set of 9s and a set of 11s is quite a bit different. So that will require a
or
truss
even
rod
10s.
adjust. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, everything was different.
Yep.
Like the whole guitar went wacko.
Oh yeah.
So, but your point of, did you stretch these out? Right? And what I was, I put them on and I played them a little bit and I tightened, I kind of, go over like a cent or whatever to, to where everything's sharp. And then just kind of like that was my stretching. But if you're not stretching and then you're trying to adjust your truss rod and then you tighten it up and then they still aren't stretched, it's only going to stretch that much and then it's going to keep continuing to stretch. So then you're going to go, this truss isn't working, and you can over tighten or bad things can happen. So make sure you're stretching them out, and that you were just lifting up on each one, giving them like 1, 2, 3 tug, just real quick.
Yeah.
And then you tune it to pitch, and then you do the truss rod.
And go ahead. Oh yeah.
Finish your thought. Finish your thought,
Yeah.
and then I'll ask.
Okay, right on. So
Jared's pointing at himself. I have a thing.
But finish your thought first.
What is your thing?
And it's about
go
this,
ahead.
so don't go on to a new thing until I
Okay.
ask a question about the truss rod cover.
yeah, so stretching strings, like Todd said, was really important. And when I do it, I'll grab around like above the pickups and kind of give it a little bit of a tug and work my way kind of up along
Right.
to the 12th fret and then up to about the 5 and kind of stretch it and let it kind of come back and then check it on the tuner, tune it up. And
It was crazy how much we saw the slack in the strings. I mean, right before our eyes.
Initially that'll
neat.
go about a whole step the first time, about a half step the second time, and about a quarter the third time. About 3 times of kind of going through that, you're there. Now you do want to be careful with your unwound strings. I am horrible about that and have to keep a surplus of high E's because I break them all the time stretching strings.
Yeah, I've done
so
that. SIG
you
strings.
got to be careful with that. But yeah, that was my thought, man.
So, myth or fact?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my turn.
Myth or fact?
Myth
Who's
or fact? Here's a myth or fact.
Myth or fact?
Yeah.
When you adjust the truss rod,
Yes.
are you supposed to wait an amount of time for it to set right, or is it an instant thing?
It's
or?
pretty instant, man. Like,
Okay.
if I've done a lot of work on a guitar, so it came in and this thing had like this bass that we were talking about earlier. You can put your thumb under the strings. After I've set everything, I'll let that set overnight, and then double check it. But for the most part, and that was another thing.
I always let mine sit overnight.
But for like the initial adjustments, no way, man. Like roll with it, get it set, and then the next day you might have to come in and give it a very minor.
double check it.
Yeah, exactly.
I never
Yep.
let mine sit overnight.
What's going on, Tony?
I would also, if you're going to do this yourself, make sure you have the right size wrench.
Yes.
Or the right size screwdriver. And the other caveat, if you have a fender that has an adjustment at the heel, do not try to jam something in to turn the truss rod at the heel, you have to actually loosen the neck, tilt it back so you can actually get the proper tool in there to tighten or loosen it.
And I think, because I think in the late 60s, they actually had notches out of the pickguard.
They did, and they still didn't work.
Yeah.
There's not
You
enough
can't
clearance.
get to it, man.
Right.
Now, if you're fortunate enough to have a headstock adjustment, make sure if it has a hex key on the end, use the right size hex key.
You strip it out and you're
Yeah, I'm
screwed.
sure you see more stripped out.
It's the worst.
truss
man.
rod nuts.
Everybody's like, "Oh, I threw an Allen wrench in there. Well, what size was it? I don't know. The one I got."
Right. Yeah. The one that came with the
a lot of
IKEA
times,
furniture.
yeah. I mean, sometimes, most guitars, if you buy it new, it does come with the right size wrench.
Yeah, Todd had mentioned talking about tools on this, and that was going to be one of the things: is get yourself a nice set of standard and electric.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Standard and electric Allen wrenches. I was like,
Acoustic and electric Allen wrenches.
Yeah.
Yep.
But and like you had mentioned screwdrivers too. Like that's the thing is like, a good screwdriver that's not going to like ruin your screw heads is
The
a
right
lot
size
better
for the right pieces
than paying
on
somebody
your
to,
guitar.
to grind that guy out.
Yeah.
Yes, tools are important.
Yeah.
Action. On to action.
Yeah.
We'll cover some more. We'll cover a bit tools here in a little bit. Action.
Action a lot of times is going to be set. So once you've established your nut, you've got your relief kind of set pretty close to where you want it, because all of that stuff happens kind of outside of
Maintenance.
Scratch that. Action. When we're setting the action, you're gonna do.
What?
I don't know.
Action Jackson.
Yeah, Action Jackson. No, it was all the clapping. I just made.
So
this
you
up.
got your nut right.
Yeah.
You got your relief in your neck.
Yeah.
Now you're moving on to the action. And
Yeah.
what I guess we talked a little bit about that, but what do you call action?
Action again, it's essentially it's your measurement from most commonly it's your measurement from the top of your 12th fret to the bottom of your string, and that needs to be, and that's the other thing that's kind of important here too is that needs to match your radius. So each string has to be relatively close to the same thing. Now you can eke that a little bit closer on your high E side, on your treble side. Your bass side, tends to need a little more room.
Yeah, they're flubbier.
That's exactly
Right.
it. But if you've got everything dialed in, your player's got a pretty light touch, and you're running around a 12-inch radius, a lot of times if everything's set correct, you can get that to be about 040, 045 on your high E and about 055 on your low E. And that's if they aren't super heavy-handed. And anything lower than that on a 12-inch radius, you'll start choking out in bends sometimes when you get around 15 through 17.
So all the
but
math.
that's all relative to,
all the math is
guitar,
where,
too.
like, if you're like me, and I'm just, gonna self-deprecate right now, but it's like the math is like blah, 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 math,
Okay.
right? But and I remember, watching setup videos and stuff, and you see the guy in there, he's like, well, that's a thousandth of an inch.
Well,
And I was
that's a guideline. So you
Sure.
start there.
But my point is that it's like, oh, come on. Like, does that thousandth of an inch really matter?
Yes.
Just
Answer
play,
is
just get
yes.
it to where, it plays nice, right?
Yeah.
And that was early mentality. I've grown since, I've learned since.
Yeah.
But that's where you're getting into where you're going to get either buzz or you're going to start going out of tune before you even get to the fret.
Yeah.
So it actually does matter. It's not just super, cerebral, like, well, I must have it between this thousandth and this thousandth.
Well, and that's the thing too is like you had talked about, your average guy should be able to set his intonation and adjust his truss rod.
Yes.
Now,
On a stage.
yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah,
At a live show.
Yeah. When your motorcycle breaks down.
Generally
Nice.
speaking, yes. But the thing about that is that's a lot easier to do if you've had a proper setup done once,
Right.
Because everything's at that point it's a little tweak. It's a half a turn here and a quarter of a turn there. It's just kind of fine tuning. But getting the bulk of the work done by somebody else ahead of time will put you in the right ballpark and make everything else a lot easier. But yeah, so going back to like the action, that is essentially like your string height after everything else has been adjusted.
And that's measured at the 12th
And
fret.
that's measured at the 12th fret most commonly.
Yeah.
So that's on bases. Sometimes I'll check that more at like the 17 because the scale length's so much longer. It kind of, let's see, where are we going from intonation? So once you've got your action set, your relief set, your nut slots correct, and your frets are perfect,
Right.
you start setting your intonation.
And the action is set with the saddles.
Yes, with the saddles. So
Yes,
on like a
before we-
tune-o-matic bridge, you've got two thumb wheels on either side, and
Yep.
that has typically a matching radius built into the bridge itself, which
Right.
is normally 12, and that'll match up to most Gibsons are a 12-inch radius.
Right.
If you've got a Fender, you actually have like two grub screws
Yeah.
on either, which are little Allen head screws, and they vary. Even
Even with the Fender, is like
it's
17
It's
different
kind of a
kinds
crapshoot sometimes with
Yeah.
what sizes some of those are. So anyway, that's why it's important to have both sets of Allen wrenches.
That's right.
But so the grub screws will kind of adjust each one of those individually. And you also want to kind of look at those and make sure they're not sitting like completely cockeyed. Like adjust both of them and adjust both of them kind of together as you go
Right.
from side to side. So you're raising it kind of evenly. Floyd Rose's, a whole other ball game, like 2-point floating tremolo systems. Actually, we're not even going to
Just
touch.
call
that's
somebody.
that's
Just call
that's that's a 104.
Yeah,
105
just,
maybe.
Just
Yeah.
call me before you start.
That's a different
adjusting
animal,
things.
man.
Yeah. So
intonation is
Yeah.
basically the compensation for the different thicknesses of the.
that's exactly.
It's actually
it.
the core of the string.
Yeah,
right?
I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up. I was
Yeah.
talking to Todd about that.
Check out the big brain on Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, that is exactly it.
That's the way it
So
sounds.
like a 46 string, even though it's drastically bigger than like your 17 gauge G string would be, the inner core is very similar in size to that.
Right.
So you've got that inner core and then that's wrapped, and that is what you're combating is that.
Right.
So if you'll notice, a lot of times if you look at a guitar that has an unwound G string, if you look at the saddles, they'll kind of work in like a stair step of 3, like up, 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 drop back down, up,
Yeah.
up, up.
Yeah.
Now, and then you'll find on like a wound third that it'll go up, 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 and then drop back down and then go up too, like an acoustic compensated saddle would.
Right.
And that's because that G string has at that point, because it's wound, has a very tiny inner core plain string inside the winding. And,
Yes.
and that's what you're compensating for is the thickness of the inner core. And that ideally, if the strings gauges 0, should be exactly the same distance as from the nut to the 12th fret, and then from the 12th fret to the saddle. But that never kind of lands exactly there because the thickness of the string kind of needs adjusted. So a lot of times you'll see like on a tune-o-matic, the bass side will actually be tilted a 16th to an 1/8 inch further towards the body of the guitar, and that kind of gives you a little more like built-in compensation, knowing that it's going to kind of need to do that. So
Right.
it gives you more room within that tune-o-matic, because like on an ABR, that's a pretty narrow bridge.
ABR.
Like an old style tune-o-matic. So they're like
Okay.
a skinny frame versus like a Nashville, which is like
Yeah.
a wide frame. So
Right.
your amount of adjustment.
There's a lot more with a Nashville.
Yeah, you got a lot with a
Yeah.
Nashville, and ABRs but ABRs look so clean and tidy.
Yeah, it does.
It's nice. But
So getting to the intonation,
Yeah.
when you're sitting there and you're like, my guitar, if I tuned it, it says it in open, it says it's a G.
Yeah.
Right? And you play it and you're like, it sounds off.
Yeah.
That's because
So
your intonation
is
off.
off. So you'll tune it open, and it says it's in tune, and then you'll fret it at the 12th fret's a good place to start, and you don't want to stop at the 12th fret to get.
That was another
Yeah.
really good point.
The 12th fret's like that's your baseline. Like
Right.
go to the 12th fret first and get it set there.
And don't press down super hard.
Yeah, don't
because then you're gonna.
To a degree, you want to kind of squeeze it like you're going to squeeze it, because you're playing the guitar. So that's why it's kind of nice for like the guitar player to know how to do some of this stuff, because you can kind of adjust for
I just
yourself.
meant excessively.
Yeah, you don't want to like squeeze the crap out of it.
Right.
You kind of want to leave it. Can I say crap?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just did.
Yes, you can.
It's fine.
Well,
crap,
hell yeah,
crap,
man.
crap.
Yeah.
Let's all
All
say
these
crap.
nut jokes.
I'm
And I'm
gonna
worried
say
about
crap.
saying crap.
Yeah.
I'm like,
G strings,
Yeah.
lube, nuts.
yeah, it's man, it's R-rated up in here.
Yeah.
So,
Intent is 1/3 of the law.
hey,
That's true.
so the way to check that. So if you hit it open and it's perfectly in tune, and then you fret it on the 12th fret, and you're like, oh man, this thing's sharp. Typically, an easy way to remember this is sharp is short, meaning that it is your
too short.
Your string length from your saddle to your nut is too short, and you need to extend that length. So you will on a Fender, you would tighten that screw, loosen your string slightly, tighten
You
that.
just want to send the saddle. One way or the
Move
other.
the saddle towards the rear of the guitar.
Yeah.
And if, in my opinion, I like a tune-o-matic with the screws up by the pickup because it's so much easier
Yeah.
to get at them. But on a Fender, it's at the rear. So, but the point is adjust that saddle to
Get a
towards the
long
rear.
screwdriver.
Yeah,
We'll cover
so,
that. in a second.
so you're not grinding your screwdriver against your paint.
Yeah.
Oh. And you can get that like minor angle. The longer that is, the longer you can kind of tweak that angle and sit in there and not slip and gouge your guitar.
You're in the pocket.
Oh yeah. So so sharp typically means short, and if it's flat, then it's too long, and you need to loosen and let
Go
that
towards the nut.
towards the nut.
Right.
Yeah.
So and it's a little bit of back and forth. So you adjust it, you'll retune it. But
And-
before you start cranking on that screw, detune that string slightly. You don't want all of that tension on there because it's creating excessive force that you're trying to pull that screw
And then you're
against.
going to get the.
Well, not that not so much as you'll strip your screws on your bridge.
Well, that too.
And,
but
and because you're trying to pull against it. So and that's
Yes.
why good tools are important too. Like a number 2 screwdriver is pretty much useless on anything but on a neck screw on a guitar. But something from like a 0 and a 1 are pretty good common screwdrivers that you're going to want to have. And
more math.
no, it's a size thing.
Well, that's math. Yes.
Okay, but you want it to fit right so that you're not stripping screws.
Yeah. No, I
out.
get it. So I wanted to make a point of when you are, if you're not sure where flat and sharp is and all that stuff, because
Use the tuner.
At one point, even using a tuner, I'm like, I don't know I don't understand because I'm just play guitar, right?
How long you been playing?
A long time, but at one point I didn't know what I was looking for.
band,
right.
man.
So
Yeah.
What's a tuner?
when you get your tuner, right?
Yeah.
And you're right up on that pitch, and it says there I'm tuned.
Yeah.
What you're looking for is it being to the right of that pitch is going to be sharp.
Yes.
Just to the left is going to be flat.
Yes.
So if you've got an electronic LED style one, like a Polytune or something, you're going to be green, and you're going to look for red on either side of that, essentially, or vice versa, whatever your colors are. But that's what you're looking for. So when you fret that on the 12th fret, you want it to be green.
You want it to be perfectly in the middle, essentially.
But if it's to the
or
left
if you're
or to
using
the right
a
of
strobo
that,
tuner, you want it to not be moving.
right, exactly.
Strobo.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to. Not
Yeah, yeah.
not
Oh, no,
everybody
it's
has
okay.
this knowledge,
Yeah.
so
I'm
you
with
know.
you.
Well, the other thing too, if you're ever
If you don't
you're
know how a
confused-
tuner works, you shouldn't be setting up your guitars.
Yeah, that's
well, but you could also use a tape measure.
Yeah.
If you know the scale length of your guitar, and that's pretty easy to determine. You measure from the nut to the 12th fret, and then double it. So if, for instance,
Fractions.
it's
Oh my
a
gosh.
well, I mean, if it's a let's just say it's a 25 and a half scale length, the Fender scale length. So it should measure from the nut to the 12th fret at
12 and 3
12
quarters.
and
12 and 3/4.
He had to do the math.
stupid
like, oh.
fractions. And generally speaking, that's if you double that distance,
Right.
that's about where the high E should be sitting.
Or just use a tuner.
Or use a tuner.
Yeah.
But if you're ever confused and say, this doesn't make any sense, I keep turning this screw and it's
Yeah.
yeah, you know.
Well,
don't-
and if you don't have a tuner and you've checked that, a lot of guys know like the 5th fret open octave way of tuning. So you fret it on the 5th fret, and then so your E string on the 5th fret and your A string open should match. that same principle, if the guitar is perfectly intonated, applies to the 17th fret.
Right.
So if there's any warble in there, then something's off somewhere.
You also did something that I hadn't done in the past, which was, I would check it at 12, and then I was like, cool, it's intonated. And you were like, I like to check it elsewhere
again at
as well.
5, and then check it again at 17.
Yeah.
Too. And it's nice because that like fine tunes it. You know what I mean? So you're like, I'm there. It's there. But if you check it there and then also at 17, you can like really fine tune that. Like you should, in theory, be able to play a G string, like a G chord, leaving open notes. But like you grabbed a G up here on your 3rd fret, you should be able to slide that on up to the 15th. Play that same
or
G.
play really a G anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere. Yeah, essentially. But the concept is though is that your open notes, even though you're a whole octave higher, should still ring in tune with each other. And that's really what the intonation is kind of about, is making the guitar not just play in tune up here in the cowboy chords, but play in tune no matter where you are on the guitar. And it's amazing. Higher end guitars tend to have much better setups out of the factory.
Right.
So you buy a high end guitar and everybody's like, oh man, these things play fantastic. It sounds great. And they sound so much better. It's such a better sounding guitar. A lot of times they've been properly set up.
Yeah.
A guitar that's not playing in tune with itself is always going to sound sour.
Yeah.
So
that brings a good...
Before people like upgrade pickups, they're like, oh, this thing needs better. No offense, but before you install pickups, you'd be amazed how much better a guitar will sound just once it's set up correct and playing in tune everywhere.
Yeah, right.
Everything just, it blooms and it rings better. There's no weird dissonance in there. It makes a difference.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of times it's not the pickup's fault. But I want to throw a wrench into this thing. What about fanned frets? Have you had to work on a guitar or a bass with fanned frets?
Yes.
And what's it like intonating those?
Same exact process. It's just it's a different scale length for each string, but the exact same steps work in the same way.
Okay.
So
that was too easy. Dang it.
Oh no, it was cool. It was a nice ding wall. It's actually one of the kids at the store owns it. It's a killer little bass.
Okay, cool.
I think that there's you were just touching on a point was like, and I know that you've heard this before. You expressed as such in the store, and I've heard other people talk about it. I just got it's a brand new guitar. Why on earth do I need to set this up?
Dude, so many things there.
And just really quick, a rule of thumb, a musician friend of mine, I remember hearing way back, he was like, if the minute I get a brand, any kind of new guitar, I don't even play it. I just take it to my guy and he dials it in because I don't know where this guitar has been. If it's used, I don't know what's happened to it. And if it's brand new, I'm pretty sure it wasn't fully set up.
Yeah.
And I think most factory guitars are not, they're rough set.
Yes.
Yeah. Back in the days of the old ma and pa music stores, companies like Gibson and Fender and all the majors would send guitars out that were close.
Yeah.
But the assumption was that store would then take the guitar and fine tune it.
Yeah.
Deep in the
Those
nut
were the
slots.
good old days, man.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. Well, now
Those are-
everything's online, but back then that was what made like the music store the one to buy it from.
Yeah.
All things being the same, they all came out of the same factory. Well, why do I buy it from Jim's store instead of John's store? Well, Jim sets all his up. John takes them out of a box and hangs them up.
Yeah.
So all these guitars come from over here are just better guitars.
Yeah.
And really, they were just had
And
the
they
final
probably
step.
also pay attention to you to get to know you, to understand you playing.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And Jim's going to do maintenance on it later down the road.
Exactly.
And those were the same days where people came out and pumped your gas and washed your windshield and checked your oil.
But now, you go into a guitar
The
store.
ice truck would show up, and
That's right.
two youths would come out and haul your ice up.
Whoa. What's a ute?
You buy it off of Amazon,
Right.
and then it shows up in a box that shipped
Yeah.
from
China.
Korea, wherever it came from.
Yeah.
The fretboard's dry. You've got fret sprout. Half the saddles are barely adjusted. And like, man, this thing's a piece of crap. It's like,
Reverend
no, man,
sets
it
all
needs-
theirs up before they.
Oh, that's cool.
Before it gets to the store.
Yeah, that's
So
cool.
a good
that's
step.
one.
I mean, they're an affordable guitar.
Yeah.
And
Same with Pure Salem.
Yeah.
He does all the setups there.
Yeah, I thought I should give those guys
But
a shout out.
you can't. I mean, even I know they do that.
Take a look at it when you get it.
Yeah, it's
Because
true.
your own
the
playability,
climate,
too.
well, it's the climate is different. If they're shipping a guitar to Arizona or New Mexico, it's not going to play the same as coming out of Toledo.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And certainly
shows
not
up
for
with
your
10s.
own personal preferences.
correct.
Either.
Right.
Shows up with 10s, you want to put 11s on it and tune it a half step down.
well,
You're
don't
going to
do
need
that.
to make some adjustments.
Something's always better than nothing, though.
Yeah.
I agree.
So Chase, we've gone through all the stuff. A couple things.
Okay.
3 things. What are some things that we want to watch out for? Okay, so you're going to get a setup. What do you watch out for? What do you listen for if you're talking to somebody?
Okay. So things you want to kind of watch out for, and things that kind of matter when you're meeting your new guy. Something to kind of consider is if you're going to go to, say, a box store for a setup. Not saying that the guy at the box store can't do a great setup, but something to kind of consider is that guy is getting paid hourly to set up a guitar.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being an hourly guy, but his care and dedication and reputation aren't really on the line.
And he may just be the guy who's manning the counter that
That's
day. He might be
exactly
selling
it.
basses or something
That's
the next
exactly
day.
it.
He might be a very good string changer.
He
Yeah,
could be.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's what it's kind of better to like seek out a guy that is, first off, you want to be professional. You don't want to take your guitar to somebody that's going to trade you a 6-pack for a setup. You know what I mean?
right.
Like that's not a good idea. Expect to spend a little bit of money. Quality work isn't cheap.
You shouldn't have to do these all the time.
Yeah,
so
you
it's like,
don't have to. And that was kind of like how we talked earlier about like once everything's been set up really well once, it's all dialed in. You don't have to cut your nut slots every time you change your strings.
Right.
But it doesn't hurt to fine tune your intonation a little when you do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's a quick, relatively easy thing to do that most guys can do.
Right.
And another thing too, like string heights. Like we talked about the saddles, those little grub screws. Sometimes those guys can vibrate a little bit and they'll kind of loosen up and that saddle will sink a little.
Yeah.
Blue Loctite, not red. Blue Loctite's a nice little fix for that. But those are kind of things that your average guitar player can kind of do if he keeps like just a tiny little light toolkit on him.
Right. I think we just really quick. You mentioned changing your intonation now and again. Just having done recording here, John was like, "Dude, tune up." And I'm like, I'm in tune. I'm in tune. I intonated. I went through and I re-intonated 2 or 3 times just so he wouldn't say, "Dude, you got to intonate," right? Because I was like, I'm not crazy. I'm looking at this. I am spot on, and things just kind of sounded sour, and that made me go, I probably need to get this checked out because there's probably something going on that I can't readily see that is affecting this.
Yeah. Odds
So
are
that's
that
something
is-
to think about. If you're playing, you're like, "Dude, this is really sour," but in researching that, okay, and this isn't it's not necessarily part of setup, but it could help you understand how to set up your guitar better, or maybe you actually don't need a setup, which is I started trying to find out like why am I getting sour tones all the time if I'm totally intonated, and lo and behold, it said maybe don't gorilla grip your guitar when you're playing because now you're over bending and you're going sharp like no matter what you do.
Yep.
So I became very conscious of that, and I was like, whoa, okay, now I'm hearing when I do that, and I ease up. So
Yeah.
I'm retraining myself not to be so heavy-handed on my left. I'm naturally going to be because I do a lot of power chord stuff,
Yeah.
right? So, but I am more conscious of that now, and that is helping with those sour notes. So it isn't the mechanics always.
Yeah, that is true. Absolutely. And a good way to fix that is to listen for it. If you've
Right.
checked it and you've tuned it and you're like, hey, this sounds sour, you're like, oh man, I'm squeezing the hell out of that. Just back
Exactly.
off a little.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk about tools real quick. So,
Okay.
You might have a guy. I've got Chase here. He's my guy. But I also like to be able to do things on my own guitars at home. I like to tinker. I like to learn. I like to say, well, you know what, I just get familiar with it.
Yeah.
When you are approaching that point of saying, I think I'm going to maybe get some tools. I got a birthday coming up. I got a Christmas coming up or whatever. I've done that, and I've got tools from Santa. It's cool, right? Because I sure as hell don't want to pay
is the best.
for a fret file out of my own dang pocket because those things get really expensive. So if
Yes, they
you're
do.
like, hey, I should be able to get some tools, and you go to StewMac and your jaw drops, it's not because StewMac is evil. Like, let's take that out of the equation. Whether you think they're overpriced or whatever, the point is you are paying for very, very specialized
Exactly.
tools to be
And they
used
are high quality tools.
every day, all the time,
Yeah.
by a professional, not a dude in his garage or a basement
Yeah.
doing this once every couple of months.
And that's why a setup's not necessarily cheap because, for instance, like so StewMac is very specialized in fret files. The ones I use run about $25 nut slotting files are about 25, $27 a pop.
Right.
And I need
And they're teeny
several,
tiny.
Yeah, and I need
But you
several
need a whole
of them.
bunch of them.
And I can only do one thing with it. I can cut an E string, that's it. That's the only thing that does.
Yeah.
And that gets expensive. So your average guy doesn't want to go spend that kind of money.
string gauge. So now you're looking
Exactly.
at 10 different files.
Yeah.
That's $200 real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if you work on basses.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
but nobody did. Just play the bass. It doesn't.
Yeah, I do work on basses.
Just
FYI.
kidding. Just kidding. I have a bass. I like bass.
Yeah.
It's cool.
But I think the average person can get into this, and if you get a set of metric and a set of
Electric.
metric and U.S. standard Allen keys, hex keys.
Yeah.
That's
And a nice set of
really
screwdrivers.
Good,
Yep.
and good
you can do
screwdrivers
just about
with,
anything on your guitar except the heavy duty stuff.
Yes, and that gets you through. Yeah,
Yeah,
as you
absolutely.
Said. Most of what you need to do, or you're not going to necessarily go out and do fret jobs, and maybe you don't even need to worry about cutting nut slots and things like that.
Right.
But at least you can.
But even just getting like like the fret eraser, like that's one of those things when you're doing your own maintenance, you're changing strings, and you're like, hey, I'd kind of like these to look a little nice. There's some grime on it. You can take care of your guitar without having to totally break the bank. Now, if you are looking at something, you're like, I want to do this, but this seems cost prohibitive. It's probably for a reason, and you might want to leave that aspect of it up to a professional.
Well, if you're going to do simple setup adjustment kind of stuff, so adjust your truss rod, set your action, intonation kind of stuff. If you're doing that, like Tony said, a quality set of Allen wrenches, a quality set of screwdrivers. So your basic kit, quality tuner, expect to spend at least $100 to get something accurate enough to really dial it in. And then a quality set of screwdrivers, quality set of Allen wrenches in both standard and metric, a straight edge, and also a string action gauge. It's like a $10, $15 tool. I don't know.
it's not even that. You can
whatever,
get them
you
for
know.
free almost. The
Don't
little
use
square
a
ones, the
credit
aluminum
card
ones.
that comes with
No.
something. But okay, you're talking like Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, man, StewMac got me on that guy. I should
Well,
have
they're
went
like
to Amazon
10
for that
I mean,
one.
it was like $10 or
Every
whatever.
once in a while, you get one in.
Throw 'em a bone.
Yeah, it's all right. But same thing. Like, not everybody needs like diamond fret files. Like we had talked about that.
Right.
But like you mentioned too about like the fret erasers and stuff. That oiling your fretboard every so often, all of that stuff's good preventative maintenance. Because if you take care of your frets, they're not going to wear as fast because
Right.
you're cleaning off a little bit of the grime. There's less stuff there.
Well,
to get
and it's a
kinda hung
way
up
to
on.
get involved with your
It
instrument.
is. Yep, you get to know it. You start noticing things like, oh man,
Yeah.
these
You
are a
probably
little
wouldn't
sharp,
have done that
Yeah.
if you weren't sitting there polishing like, whoa, I got some serious dents in here.
Yep, that's exactly it.
And I remember what they
So-
said on the podcast. Oh my gosh, I might want to get this taken care
Yeah,
of.
because if you get it done when they're not major, it's a lot. It's a lot less costs
Right.
involved.
We
with
left
that.
out one big, giant, enormous thing.
What's that?
And this is something that, I'm ready to take rocks thrown at me here, but I've done this for friends that are, just family friends and stuff. They're like, hey, I got a cool new guitar, and I check it out, and it's cheese grater.
Oh yeah,
Right, all the way down the
Yeah.
neck. Now,
Fret
sometimes that happens seasonally. You get a little bit of shrinkage in the wood and stuff, but oftentimes, if it's a lower end guitar, it
Yes.
hasn't been taken care of, and that's one of those things that I had an old Squire, and I was like, doggone it, I'm just going to learn how to do this to the best of my ability. It is a Zen thing. It takes a lot of time, but if you take the care, you learn about it, and you can actually start to, take care of that yourself if you have the right tools. And that's one of those things that I got very acquainted with the actual fretboard and everything.
Well, and with that stuff too, like there's ways you can do it. You can either use like a sanding block, you can use a file. There's a lot of stuff, and it's also important too. With all of these things, different guys have different ways. So kind of like how I touched on like a flat straight edge versus a not straight edge. I like a flat straight edge. That's me. Another guy might have great results with that.
Right.
You know, is the best tool for this job a chisel or a saw? Well, which one are you more
Take the
comfortable
time
with?
and just like watch a handful of videos.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And the worst thing that happens is you learn either how to do something or why you might not do that to your expensive
You
guitar.
learn how not to do it. You know what I mean? What
Yeah.
was it Edison used to say? I never failed. I just learned how not to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's kind of the, yeah.
Awesome.
I also want to say too, all of this with a grain of salt. Everybody's got, different strokes for different folks. And another thing too is a good luthier tech, whatever fancy word you want to put behind it, is always trying to improve their craft. So anything that I said today, I believe to be true today. In 3 months, I may have moved to another
Yeah. Well, you
stage.
even mentioned
You know what
in
I
your
mean?
shop, you're
So like you
I'm-
kind of want to.
I'm not the same guy I was as a guitar technician, builder, engineer, whatever. You luthier.
5 years
that I was
ago as
5 years
am
ago
today.
Right.
So that's something to kind of grain of salt with all of this stuff because
It's not
some people
absolute
get a
gospel,
little
it's
fired
just
up on things.
yeah.
So
Excellent. Well, this has been super, super informative. If you have questions, you don't know who to talk to or whatever, you can maybe.
yeah, oh yeah, reach out for sure.
Where can they find you at?
They can find me at chasingvanishguitars.com, gullettguitarservice.com. Find me on Facebook. Find me on Instagram. I'm sure there's probably a link on the Guitar Knobs podcast page somewhere. I'm in. I don't know if I'm in the Yellow Pages. I'm on Google.
Who's
Yellow Pages.
I'm on Google.
Pages.
I still get a phone
I've always
book.
wanted to say that.
Jared's got it.
Like,
He's got
I'm
it.
in
He
the
still
Yellow
uses them.
Pages.
Yeah.
Look
You know
me
what?
up.
I get the phone book and then I just put it in the recycle bin before I even get in
that
the
crazy?
house.
How are you still getting a phone? Oh, Jared.
He lives in Pataskala.
Yeah,
I still have a landline for the fax machine.
Yep.
Oh,
A what?
boy. And we're not going to get into that.
Is that in your
Okay.
DeLorean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, Chase, thank you so much for walking us
dude,
through that.
thanks for
This
having
has
me. I hope I
been
didn't-
super,
I
super
told you a
helpful.
couple weeks ago, like, hey, man, you got to
Yeah.
come down and be on the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jared?
Yes, of course. It's time for Would You Rather?
Nice.
This week's Would You Rather is brought to us by our good old pal, Champion Lecky.
Wooly.
Good old Willie, man. So it's going to be weird, so please follow along.
Yes.
You've got a gig coming up. The headstock is falling off your guitar because it's a good old Gibson, and someone walked past you too quickly. For some reason, go ahead.
That is a.
I sense some sarcasm in that
It's
statement.
so funny. It's not. Nobody bumped it. They just walked past it fast.
That's all they
Your
did.
headstock fell off.
Yep.
Funny, Wooly.
You had to project the comedy in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for some reason, there are two guitars that you can choose from in your local vicinity. They are both exactly the same guitar as whatever you use, however unlikely that they may sound. But,
Wait.
What?
but, listen, one is a lefty, assuming you're right-handed. So the strings are all wrong way around.
They're all wrong way around.
That's exactly what it says. If he were saying this, it would make more sense.
It would. Yes.
The other
He's from
is
northern the UK. So.
yeah. So the other is right-handed, assuming you're right-handed, but it only has every other string. That's right. Only 3 well-spaced strings. You have to choose one or relearn all the songs on.
I wish we could have got him to read that. Not that you didn't. You did a fine job interpreting, but
I read it verbatim.
with the with all his inflection and everything. Thank you, Wooly, for submitting that. Super fun.
Yeah, you can't redo Wooly, man.
No,
He's
you
a
can't.
one of a kind.
That is so true.
I love that
Champion Lecky. Check him out on our podcast, our website, our episodes, and out there in the ether.
Super funny.
Okay, here we go. Tony Baloney, what are you doing? Do we need a recap?
Well, so as I understand it, your headstock has broken on your guitar.
Yeah.
There are 2 guitars in the close by vicinity.
The vicinity.
And one of them, I'm a left or a right-handed player, so one of them would be a left-handed guitar with all 6 strings, but strung the wrong way around.
Right.
Or there's a right-handed guitar that is missing every other string, so you have only 3 strings. Am I correct
That
in
is correct.
assuming?
That's it.
Wait,
Yeah.
wouldn't a left-handed guitar strung the wrong way around be strung
the right way.
Yeah, go along with it.
I was like, is this where absolutely nothing always happens? Never?
So basically,
Tony, what are
it's
you
a
doing?
Jimi Hendrix guitar.
Yeah, essentially that would be. So as we were talking a little bit earlier, I've every once in a while I'll pick up a mandolin, and because a mandolin is basically if it's an 8-string or a 4-string, it's an upside down guitar.
Okay.
So you can play basically chords if you know how to play a mandolin on a left-handed guitar.
So you're going to go with that.
I'm going to go with the left-handed guitar because it has all 6 strings. And I mean that to me is a lot better option than every other string.
Yeah. Okay. Jared?
Unless you're playing Presidents of the United States of America.
Right.
Well, because I love my good old buddy Tony Baloney, I'm probably going to choose the same thing.
Yeah.
Really?
I'd rather take all 6 strung the wrong way on a left-hand guitar, so I don't have to do anything but just play it.
Wow. Jace?
Every other string.
Okay.
There's only so many notes, and you can play them all on one string.
That's what I'm talking about. My kind of music.
Just that
I just
melody.
need one string.
Okay. Okay.
Losers.
All right. Well, that
Half-wits.
was a funny question.
Accurate.
Champion Lecky. Thank you,
I love
Wooly,
it.
for submitting that. Jared, I'm looking at your cohort over there. Tony,
I am.
Senor
let's
Baloney.
do this.
At this point in the show, we like to thank a very special group of people.
That's right.
Those are our executive producers.
That's right.
And you may be asking yourself, if you're listening, what is an executive producer? And B, how do I become one? Mm-hmm. Go over to patreon.com/the guitar knobs. You get there, and there's like a couple different levels you can participate in. You get some great swag with each level. Anything from barefoot buttons to picks and stickers and T-shirts and keychains and what else is there? There's giveaways.
Yeah,
Lots of
giveaways.
them.
All
Giveaway
kinds of stuff. But the level that will make you feel the best and make our days is if you become an executive producer.
Oh, man.
But I'm told that in addition to the executive producer, there is a level right now, the Grand Poobah.
That is
level.
correct.
That's crazy.
And there will be honorary fezzes going out to all of our Grand Poobahs.
That's right.
So you will wear your beautiful red fez proudly, I'm sure.
As you listen to the podcast.
Yes. But one of the things, in addition to all the great swag that you get and the great feeling in your cockles of your heart of helping out a podcast like ours, is, Jared, what
You
happens?
get to have your name read on the thing.
Executive producers and Grand Poobahs get their name read on the thing. So let's start with our Grand Poobahs, shall we?
Let's do it.
Thank you to Jonathan Jerusik, Corey Nigro, David Kaminga, Cody Lane, Cody Foster, Sean S., Tommy Manasco, and all of our other fez-wearing brethren.
That's right.
Our regular executive producers, and there's nothing regular about them, they're just great people.
They are.
Mr. Tom Brazen,
My man.
Martin Cliff, John Daly, Chris Carney, Darren Gregory, Doug Christ, Michael Van Zant, Ken Sayers, Brian Robinson, Michael Senchuk, Stefan Lamb, Johnny Knowles, Anthony Lanthrop, John England, Tyler Bray, Brad Partridge, Ty Harmon, Chris Heidel, John Esterly, Tim Novak, Doug Gann, Justin Jones, Steve Keys, and Brett Alexander.
Hey.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, man. So much stuff.
Gracias.
Thank you for helping our show. This is coming in at a timely point because we are trying to re-studioize so that we have a permanent home. We're borrowing a home right now.
To
and
build some
we're
walls.
looking at, we got to do a little bit of construction. So anyhow, thank you. Chase, thank you
Yes.
for doing this. We've already said where people can find you all over the dang
Ask 'em
whole
again.
place. ChaseandVintageGuitars.com
Yes.
and the place for your setups and repairs and everything.
Gullett Guitar Service.
Gullett Guitar Service.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get weird there.
You did.
Super weird.
Yeah. Tony Bolini, where can people find you?
You say you want to get a special pick guard, you're changing out pickups, you're doing whatever. You want something really crazy in terms of colors and materials, go over to pickguardian.com. If you want to see some of the projects that we've talked about on Instagram, go to pickguardian and the number 1.
Jared?
Well, if you need some new pickups or new old-looking pickups or anything like that,
How about some sidewinders?
or Sidewinder type pickups.
What's that? That is very specific, and not everybody knows what that
That's
is.
actually a noiseless P90.
Well, there you go.
If you were
Okay.
listening to the podcast, you would have heard
I'm
that
gonna
earlier.
I'm gonna add
reiterating.
that I'm gonna add that to the product thing here.
You should.
really soon. So, just get a hold of me, Jared Jared at BrandonWildPickups.com. Go to
Perfect.
the website and browse around.
All right. You can shoot me an email, Todd at theguitarknobs.com. Also, DM me on Instagram. We'll talk. I like you people out there. We all like you people out there. We want to hear from you. Please send us your would you rathers and just general like, hey, this is me. I'm out here and I'm listening to you. And this is what I think of things. We love those connections. Thank you so much to Chase.
Thank you for having me.
Again, thank you all for listening and supporting our show. Have a great guitar week and subscribe.
Because
Saying
Todd
like,
was
hey,
being
he's
a
here.
Oh, I got
All right,
doofus.
Gotcha.
here we go.
I've lost my train of thought.
Are you ready to go?
You thought we were going.
I thought we
I know.
were going.
Are we going
Are
now?
we not going?
Let's go get some fries.
Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/theguitarknobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, 4 on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.